Like, these guys were brilliant, but they were also maniacs. And they went out and set records all over the place. Oliver Sacks had the California state squat record. But I mean, they broke every record in the world. And then one of the guys who was like one of the masterminds of their programming was a guy named George Friend, who was a thrower who had a bunch of records in throwing. And the Soviets would all come to him for advice on lifting. So they were coming from the conjugate system, the periodization system. They were abandoning that shit, coming to George Friend and getting him to tell them how to train. And apparently those methods came from Bob Bednarski's coach, which I just found out from Connor Heffernan, I think. So, yeah, cool. But so they basically were like a test tube for all of the powerlifting techniques that we have now. And so I put all that stuff into Westside Connection. It's basically the LA petri dish of the original powerlifting methods. And I included the methods that they used at their competitor's gym too, Zuver's gym, which was this fascinating gym. You would have loved that gym because there was a lot of weird lifts going on in there. Because Bert Elliott was a strongman who like had the old timey strongman mustache and wore the one strap unitard, and he trained there, and they like it looked like Disneyland for lifters. So they had like huge statues outside, and like it really looked like an amusement park. So it was a crazy time to be a lifter. I would not have enjoyed going there because the 1950s would be awful, but or the 60s. But yeah, it's interesting to read about.
It's interesting that the methods they used, which were destroying everyone at the time, aren't really discussed or used really anymore. That's kind of, I think, one of the takeaways as well from what you were writing.
They are. It's just that, so Westside took all those methods and then they combined them with the periodization from the Soviets, which I don't, do you know did I relate that in Westside Connection, what the source of periodization? Yeah. So the Soviets, it was illegal to lift weights. Bodybuilding was illegal in the Soviet Union because they thought it was decadent because people were obsessed with Hercules at the time. So the Soviets shut down all the gyms, and the only place you could lift weights was in a Soviet facility or in an underground gym that were illegal gyms in like apartment blocks in Moscow and things like that. It had to be in a big city. And so they had these underground bodybuilding gyms, but they were difficult to get into. And also, like, most of these people were like from farms and like rural areas and things like that, which had neither weights nor food. So they couldn't train for 6 months a year and they weren't eating. So these people had to be filled with drugs and food and training as fast as humanly possible to get them ready to go compete. So to win from Mother Russia. I mean, these people were sending people into space with a fucking pencil and paper to do their own calculations to get back to Earth. We should not be following their methods for lifting weights.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, and that's another
science is science.
Yeah. So to see things evolve in that sense around programming and it coming, from this area of, okay, we got to fill these. This is the programming we need to use. They were using it on these Soviet athletes, which were athletes only training half the year, getting filled with drugs, trying to get as strong as possible, as quick as possible. And
still barely beating us Americans. Yeah. Barely.
So it's interesting to see, like, that's where we start thinking this is the direction we need to go with programming.